A few days ago, I went looking for a story about Grok uncovering a secret hidden inside Google's quantum computer. What I found instead wasn't a scientific breakthrough. It was a machine, a content machine, churning out the same fake headline over and over again. And once you see how it works, you will never scroll past a headline the same way again. Here's how it started. Someone sent me a video titled, roughly, "What Grok Revealed About Google's Quantum Chip Will Shock You." The thumbnail showed a glowing blue chip, a shadowy silhouette of Elon Musk, and bold yellow text promising something impossible. Scientists stunned. The words that appear on 9 out of 10 videos like this. I watched it. Then I searched for the title again, expecting to find one story, maybe 2 versions of it from competing channels. Instead, I found dozens. What Grok 3 says about Google's quantum chip will leave you speechless. Grok 3 reveals Google's quantum chip secrets. Google's quantum chip secret revealed by Grok. This changes everything. What Grok 4 found inside. Google's quantum chip raises serious questions. Different channels, different thumbnails, different narrators. Some human, some clearly synthetic. But underneath, the same story, word for word, beat for beat, like 20 different actors reading from one script nobody admitted to writing. I kept a running list as I clicked through them, and by the 10th video I could predict the next sentence before it was spoken, which is not something that happens when you are watching genuinely independent reporting on a real event. That is the moment this stopped being a curiosity and became an investigation. Because when the same specific, oddly detailed claim shows up across dozens of unrelated channels, using different branding, different voices, different upload dates, that is not independent verification. That is a template. And templates do not appear in journalism. They appear in content farms. I want to pause on that thumbnail for a second, because it is doing more work than it looks like it is doing. The glowing chip signals cutting-edge technology before a single word is spoken. The shadowy silhouette borrows the recognizability of a famous face without needing to license an actual photo of him, which also happens to make the whole thing a little harder to challenge, since technically no specific claim has been made yet, just an impression. And the bold yellow text, scientists stunned, shocked, speechless, is doing the emotional labor that an accurate headline never could, because an accurate headline would have to say something like, "A company announced an incremental improvement in error correction," which, however genuinely important that actually is to the field, does not get you to click nearly as fast. Every single design choice in that thumbnail exists to get you past the click, and none of it exists to tell you anything true. So let me tell you what the story actually claims, because the claim itself is a masterclass in how to build something that sounds true. It goes like this. During a routine calibration of Google's Sycamore quantum processor, Grok, the AI system built by Elon Musk's company, was set loose on the raw data. And instead of seeing the random noise you would expect from a quantum system, Grok noticed something that should not exist. Clusters of qubits behaving in unison. Patterns repeating far beyond what probability should allow. A rhythm hidden beneath the chaos. The videos describe research teams from MIT, Stanford, and Oxford rushing to verify the finding within hours and reaching a stunned, unanimous conclusion. The laws of quantum mechanics as we understood them were incomplete. Read that back slowly and notice what is actually being asserted. 3 of the most prestigious research institutions on Earth, independently confirming within hours that a chatbot side project had cracked something physicists had not found in a century of quantum theory. If that were true, it would not be a YouTube video with stock footage and a text-to-speech narrator. It would be the biggest science story of the decade, reported by every physics journal, every major newspaper, every science correspondent on the planet within a day. It is not in any of those places, not one. And that absence is not a small gap in the story, it is the whole story. So I did what I do whenever a claim like this crosses my path. I went looking for the source underneath the source. Not another video repeating the claim, but the actual paper, the actual statement, the actual named scientist willing to put their reputation behind it. I checked Google's own quantum computing announcements. I checked physics preprint servers, where real unpublished research gets posted for the community to scrutinize before formal peer review. I checked science journalism outlets that specialize in exactly this kind of breakthrough, the ones with a track record of getting quantum computing claims right, or at least getting them checked by actual physicists before publishing. Nothing. No paper, no press release, no named researcher from MIT, Stanford, or Oxford confirming any of it. The trail does not just go cold. It never existed in the first place. What did exist was real, and that is what makes this trick so effective. Google has a real quantum chip called Sycamore, and it has produced real, genuinely significant results in the past. Google also announced a newer chip called Willow in December of 2024, and that announcement was legitimate, covered by credible outlets, explained by actual Google researchers, describing a real computational benchmark. Grok is a real AI system, built by a real company, used by real people every day. Every individual noun in this story is true. Google is real. Sycamore is real. Willow is real. Grok is real. MIT, Stanford, and Oxford are real institutions that do real quantum research. The only fictional part is the sentence that connects them all together, and that is the oldest trick in the disinformation playbook. You do not need to invent a fake world. You just need to borrow real, trusted names and stitch them into a sentence that never actually happened. There is also something worth naming about why this particular flavor of fake story has become so common recently, and it has less to do with human dishonesty than with a change in tools. Writing 20 convincing, differently worded versions of the same false claim used to take real time and real effort, which naturally limited how much of this kind of content could exist. Generating synthetic narration in dozens of different voices, used to require studio equipment or paid voice actors. Producing a professional-looking thumbnail, used to require design skill. Today, a language model can draft the script in seconds, a text-to-speech tool can narrate it convincingly, and an image generator can produce the glowing chip and the dramatic silhouette, all without a single human needing to know anything true about quantum computing at all. None of that makes the underlying trick new. Borrowed authority and manufactured urgency are as old as rumor itself. What is new is the speed and the volume, the fact that one person with no expertise and no real story can now produce, in an afternoon, the same volume of convincing-looking content that used to require an entire team. Once I understood the shape of the claim, I wanted to understand the shape of the business behind it, because stories like this do not spread by accident. They spread because someone built a system designed to make them spread. And once you look at that system, the fake quantum chip story stops being about quantum chips at all. It becomes a case study in exactly how modern misinformation gets manufactured, packaged, and delivered to your feed. It starts with a template, a formula that is already proven it can hook an audience. Take a trusted, futuristic name, something like a major tech company or a famous AI system. Attach it to a vague but dramatic action word. Revealed, uncovered, exposed. Add a second trusted name to lend credibility by association, ideally someone widely recognized, like a well-known tech billionaire. Then close with an emotional promise instead of an actual fact. Will shock you. Will leave you speechless. Changes everything. Notice that none of those closing phrases describe what happened. They describe how you are supposed to feel about something you have not been told yet. That gap between the emotional promise and the missing information is the entire mechanism. Your brain wants to close that gap. Curiosity is not a character flaw. It is a basic, healthy human instinct. And that instinct is precisely what gets targeted. From there, the formula gets duplicated, not written once, but generated over and over, with small variables swapped out. Grok 3 becomes Grok 4. Sycamore becomes Willow. One narrator's voice becomes another. This is not 20 different creators independently discovering the same scoop. This is almost certainly one script, or one core narrative, run through paraphrasing tools and text-to-speech generators, then uploaded across a network of channels designed to blanket search results and recommendation feeds with the same bait from every possible angle. If you miss it on one channel, the algorithm serves you the identical story wearing a different thumbnail 5 minutes later. And why go to all that trouble for a fake quantum computing story specifically? Because the topic is chosen with precision, not randomness. Quantum computing sits in a sweet spot for this kind of content. It is genuinely complicated. Complicated enough that most viewers, reasonably, do not carry a working knowledge of quantum decoherence or random circuit sampling in their back pocket. That complexity creates a gap between what people understand and what they are willing to believe, and vague, impressive-sounding language slides easily into that gap. At the same time, quantum computing carries a kind of magic aura in the popular imagination, science that already sounds like science fiction, which makes an outlandish claim feel only slightly more outlandish than the real thing. Pair that with a widely recognized name attached to an AI system, and you have manufactured instant borrowed authority without a single actual expert ever being consulted. Once the video exists, the incentive driving all of it is almost embarrassingly simple. Attention converts to advertising revenue. A title promising a shocking discovery earns more clicks than a title accurately describing a real, incremental engineering milestone, and clicks are the entire currency this business runs on. Nobody making these videos needs you to still believe the claim tomorrow. They only need you to click today, watch long enough for an ad to play, and maybe share it before your brain gets around to asking, wait, did this actually happen? The business model is not built on being right. It is built on being fast, being emotionally loud, and being everywhere at once. And the recommendation systems built into most video platforms end up rewarding exactly this behavior, not because anyone designed them to favor falsehood specifically, but because they are optimized to favor whatever keeps people watching, And a dramatic, emotionally charged claim reliably keeps people watching better than a careful, accurate one does. Once a handful of these videos start performing well, the system learns to show them to more people who watched something similar, which is how you end up with an entire genre. Dozens of nearly identical uploads, all thriving inside the same feedback loop at once. It is worth saying clearly that this is not a conspiracy, coordinated by any single company or hidden hand. It is closer to evolution. Whatever format survives, contact with the algorithm gets copied, and whatever gets copied enough starts to look from the outside like a real trend rather than what it actually is, which is a template that happened to work, being run again and again by different people chasing the same result. It is also worth noticing that this exact template is not unique to quantum computing. Once you know the shape of it, you start seeing it everywhere. AI reveals shocking secret hidden in ancient pyramid. Scientists discover something that changes everything about the ocean floor. AI uncovers hidden message in old NASA footage. Swap out the noun in the middle and the machine keeps running. Archaeology works because it carries its own built-in sense of mystery. Space works because most of us will never personally verify a claim about a distant planet. Ancient history works because the original sources are genuinely hard to access. The subject changes, but the mechanics underneath never do. A trusted name, borrowed and stitched onto a dramatic and vague claim, closed with a promise about how you're going to feel. If you learn to recognize that shape once, you start recognizing it everywhere it shows up, regardless of whether the costume that week happens to be quantum physics, ancient Egypt, or the outer solar system. So now the harder, more useful question. How do you actually tell the difference between this and something real, in real time, before you have spent 20 minutes falling down the same rabbit hole I did? Start with the emotional temperature of the headline itself. Real scientific findings are almost always described in careful, hedged, specific language, because scientists know exactly how easily a claim can be overturned, and they write and speak accordingly. Headlines built entirely around your feelings, shock, disbelief, being speechless with no actual specific fact attached, are a warning sign on their own. Ask yourself what precisely is being claimed. If you cannot restate the finding in one plain, factual sentence after watching the video, there probably was not one. Next, look for named humans attached to specific institutions, and then actually check whether those humans exist and said what they are quoted as saying. Real Science reporting names the researcher, names their university, and often links to or names the actual paper or preprint. Vague appeals to authority, research teams confirmed, scientists were stunned. Without a single name attached, should raise your guard immediately. It cost nothing to write, scientists were stunned. It costs quite a lot to fabricate a named professor with a verifiable university email address and a real publication record, which is exactly why fabricated stories almost never bother to do it. After that, go looking for the primary source yourself and understand what that phrase actually means. A primary source is not another video or article repeating the claim with different words. It is the original paper, the original company announcement, the original data. For anything claiming a scientific breakthrough, that usually means checking whether a preprint exists on an open physics repository, checking a company's own official blog or press page, or checking whether reputable science journalists, the ones whose entire job is separating real findings from hype, have covered it. If a discovery this dramatic exists nowhere except a wave of nearly identical YouTube videos, the absence itself is your answer. This step alone would have ended my search in about 2 minutes if I had done it first, before watching a single one of those videos, which is exactly why it deserves to be your very first move next time rather than your last. Then, specifically watch for the duplication pattern I stumbled into. Search the exact headline, or a close variation of it, in quotation marks. If you find one thoughtful, well-sourced article and nothing else, that is a normal, healthy result. If you find a dozen videos from unrelated channels, all making the identical, unusual claim within a similar time frame, all missing named sources, that pattern itself is diagnostic. Real discoveries get reported by outlets with different angles, different levels of skepticism, and different follow-up questions. Fabricated discoveries get repeated, not reported, because nobody involved actually did any original work to have a different angle on. It also helps, before you trust any single channel, to spend 30 seconds looking at its upload history rather than just the one video in front of you. A channel that has posted a genuine singular investigation once in a while, built up over years, reads very differently from a channel that uploads a new shocking AI discovery every 2 or 3 days, always in the same format, always with the same style of thumbnail, always promising the same kind of disbelief. That second pattern is not a channel with an unusually good run of scoops. It is a production line, and production lines do not need a real story to keep running, only a working formula and a fresh coat of paint each time. It also helps to sit with the plausibility of the claim against everything else you already know and let that create honest, useful friction. If quantum mechanics, one of the most rigorously tested frameworks in the entire history of science, had genuinely been shown incomplete by a chatbot's side analysis that would not stay contained to a handful of low view count videos. It would restructure how physics is taught within a semester. It would be the lead story on every science desk on the planet. The complete absence of that reaction is not neutral information. It is strong evidence against the claim, and it is worth treating it that way. Finally, pay attention to how a piece of content makes you feel while you are still watching it, not after. Content designed to bypass your critical thinking almost always works by generating urgency, awe, or kind of specialness, the sense that you have stumbled onto information the rest of the world has not caught up to yet. That feeling is not proof you have found something true. It is often proof you have found something engineered to feel that way, because that feeling, that specific cocktail of urgency and awe, is the entire product being sold to you in exchange for your attention. It is worth sitting for a moment with why this particular kind of story works so well on smart, careful people, because the honest answer is not that anyone involved is gullible. Curiosity gaps are effective precisely because they exploit a completely healthy mental habit, the drive to resolve an open question once it has been raised in your mind. A headline that says, "Scientists confirm something ordinary," does not open a gap at all, so your brain has nothing to chase. A headline that says, "Scientists were left speechless by something impossible," opens a gap immediately, and that gap generates a small, real physical itch to know more. Combine that itch with a name you already trust, a major tech company, a familiar public figure, a famous AI system, and the claim gets a kind of borrowed credibility before your critical thinking has even had a chance to engage with it. None of that is a personal failing. It is closer to a lock being picked with a key shaped exactly for it. Understanding that the lock exists, and understanding roughly how the key was cut, is most of what it takes to stop it from working on you next time. I want to be clear about something, because it would be easy to walk away from this with the wrong lesson. This is not an argument that AI systems like Grok are dangerous or untrustworthy, and it is not an argument that Google's quantum computing research is somehow suspicious. Willow is real. It is genuinely impressive engineering, and Google's own researchers have described on the record what it actually demonstrated, in careful, specific, hedged language, the exact opposite tone of the videos making the rounds about it. The problem here was never the underlying technology. The problem is a layer of content built on top of real technology, using real names as camouflage, engineered specifically to exploit the fact that most of us do not have the time or the specialized background to check every claim before we share it. And that is really the deeper point underneath all of this. The volume of information moving past us every day has grown so large that fact-checking every single claim before reacting to it simply is not realistic for anyone. That is not a personal failing, and it is not something to feel embarrassed about. It is the actual environment we are all operating in now. But that also means a small number of fast, repeatable checks matter more than they ever have before. Who is the named source, and can you verify they exist and said this? Does the primary source actually exist, not a summary of it, but the thing itself? Does this exact story appear duplicated across unrelated channels with no original reporting behind any of them? And does the complete absence of mainstream coverage make sense, given how significant the claim would be if it were actually true? None of those checks require a physics degree. None of them require more than a few minutes. What they require is pausing, just briefly, at the exact moment a piece of content is working hardest to make you feel like pausing is the last thing you should do. That pause is the entire skill. Everything else, the source checking, the duplication search, the named expert verification, is just what happens once you have already decided to give yourself that pause instead of clicking share. So here's where this leaves us. Grok did not reveal a hidden anomaly buried inside Google's quantum chip. Nobody at MIT, Stanford, or Oxford confirmed that the laws of physics needed rewriting because a chatbot flagged something strange in a dataset. What actually happened is smaller and honestly a little more unsettling once you sit with it. A formula got discovered, not a scientific one, but a rhetorical one. A formula for building a headline that borrows real credibility from real institutions and real technology, attaches it to a vague, dramatic claim, and lets human curiosity do the rest of the work for free. That formula got duplicated across dozens of channels, dressed up in different thumbnails and different synthetic voices, and it worked well enough on enough people to be worth repeating. There is a version of this conversation that ends with a kind of blanket cynicism, a sense that nothing online can be trusted anymore, that every headline is probably fake and every source is probably manufactured. I do not think that is the right place to land, and I do not think it is even accurate. Most of what you encounter most days is not engineered to deceive you. But the small fraction that is has gotten faster to produce, cheaper to distribute, and better disguised than it used to be. which means the old habit of trusting something simply because it looks polished or because it wears the name of a company or a person you already recognize no longer holds up the way it once did. The goal is not to trust less. The goal is to trust more precisely, to reserve your full confidence for claims that can actually survive the handful of checks we walked through, and to hold everything else a little more loosely until it does. The genuinely useful takeaway is not that you should distrust every exciting piece of science news you come across from now on. Real breakthroughs happen. They are reported carefully, by named people and named institutions, and they hold up when you go looking for the primary source underneath the headline. The useful habit is simply asking, every time something promises to shock you, whether it can survive being restated in one plain sentence, whether a real name person is standing behind it, and whether it exists anywhere outside the version specifically engineered to make you feel something before you had the chance to check it. Ask that consistently enough, and headlines like, "The one that started this whole investigation stop working on you." Not because you got cynical, but because you got specific. And specific is the one thing content like this can never actually survive. So the next time a title promises that something will shock you or leave you speechless or change everything you thought you knew, treat that promise as a question rather than a fact, and go looking for the answer yourself before you decide how you are supposed to feel about it. Somewhere out there, a real, quietly remarkable story about quantum computing is actually unfolding, told by researchers willing to put their names on it. It is just never going to be the one shouting the loudest for your attention,